Welcome to our second week of looking at COVID through that lens of faith. Um, on this journey, I'm basing my thought not only what COVID might have caused, but on what the pandemic intensified or how the pandemic surfaced to our awareness, maybe what already existed, all through the lens of faith. Now, last week we explored how COVID intensified the already existing trend towards depersonalization of daily living. We referred to the survey for so many that their greatest companion was their phone, not another human being. This week I'm exploring the sense of permanent darkness which the pandemic caused. The darkness which set in was experienced in community. What had brought light to the human community before COVID was either subdued or significantly curtailed. Going shopping, seeing each other's face was curtailed. Children sharing with their parents what happened in school today was no longer experienced. Sharing with co-workers at a break during COVID or a quick lunch was no longer a part of going to work because work was from home. Human contact for retirees was no longer taken for granted as the normal opportunities to relate, such as going to church or other routine social events, were replaced by living within the four walls of one's house. Singleness became aloneness. News on the tube was consumed by reports of the ravages of the pandemic. Medical personnel were pushed to the physical extremes of providing care, and caretakers and family were separated from each other, even when far too often the journey ended in death of loved ones. Simply stated, darkness set in. And often the response to sustained darkness is fear, distrust of others. The darkness caused personal experiences of depression, frustration, disbelief, mistrust. Most of us experienced at least a touch of these responses in our own life. I did, and I assume you did. If we were fortunate not to experience these personal responses, we certainly observed them in others. One person shared with me an interesting observation. This person was a denier. Early on, referred to COVID as a hoax, just a bad case of the annual flu. This person shared that even as a denier, how they were affected by the pandemic. All of a sudden, they had feelings that they didn't share with anybody else. They depressed them. They were on edge as normal ways of life were prevented. They were frustrated. Their trust in anyone else was lessened, and they finally stopped believing anyone about anything. Even a denier experienced the darkness caused by the pandemic. Through the eyes of faith, darkness had set in. This is the week before Easter Sunday. I'm sharing this video 2 days before we recall the day that we call Good Friday. The narrative of Good Friday is that darkness covered the earth. So it was with the pandemic. Darkness covered the earth. Through the lens of faith, as darkness covered the earth on a Friday long ago, what happened? The veil of the temple was rent. Now, that veil separated the Holy of Holies from the holy place, and it was rent, torn in two. Prior to the death of Jesus, only the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies once a year to experience the presence of God. Upon the death of Jesus, that veil no longer existed. The curtain was torn, even in the darkness, even in total darkness. The presence of God was accessible to every human being. We don't sing hymn number 282 very often, but this is what the second verse reads. The veil is rent in Christ alone. The living way to heaven is seen. The middle wall is broken down, and all the world may enter in. You see, the truth for all ages, including 2020 to 2023, was experienced in the darkest hours. Indeed, newscast after newscast covered the extraordinary expressions of agape love, sacrificial and empathetic love. The veil of the temple was torn in two a long time ago, and even today. Healthcare workers working with little or no rest, staying beyond the end of their shift to embrace a child of God dying from the COVID in their arms. The veil of the temple was rent. Parents who had no understanding of modern math, struggling to understand and grasp a concept that seemed foreign to both the parent and the child as they coped in the time of darkness. A neighbor. The story is so touching. Walking daily, first to the next door neighbor, then to every house on the block, then daily to many more homes to check on those that they did not know, but cared for them, to often be the first one to discover who was ill or who maybe just needed a quart of milk. The veil of the temple was rent. The presence of agape love was available for all. Persons who were still employed, working from home, welcomed a neighbor family whose wage earner had been laid off. They welcomed that family into their home to live for months until work was found. Facing bankruptcy, they discovered that there was no bankruptcy of agape love in the life of an unknown neighbor who was willing to sacrifice for them. You see, the curtain separating one from agape love was torn in the darkness of the Friday we call good, but also in the darkness of the pandemic. Reading again the words of the hymn writer, who just happened to be a man named Charles Wesley, one of the brothers who founded the Methodist movement. The veil is rent in Christ alone, the living way to heaven is seen, and the middle wall is broken down that all the world may enter in and experience agape love, even in the darkness of the pandemic that set in. You see, the bankruptcy of agape love never takes place. Indeed, this is what it means to take a look at COVID through the lens of faith. In the darkness, there is never bankruptcy of agape love, for the veil of the temple was rent. Easter, indeed. A lot to think about. A couple of questions for your thought in our conversation together. How did you experience the darkness of the pandemic which covered the earth? Secondly, what are your stories of the curtain being torn and agape love prevailing in the darkest hours of the pandemic? Thank you for being a part of our journey together.